Hello and welcome to this Education on Air breakout session. My name's Blake Seifert, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about Chromebooks and about, I guess, my journey and our journey here at McKinnon Secondary College, and also just more broadly around change management and planning and how we kind of got from A to B. So today I'm going to be joined just on the hangout here with Chris as well. He's going to help out with the Q&A. Hi, Chris.
Morning, guys.
Thanks for stepping in. Appreciate that. And we're going to get started. So yeah, absolutely looking forward to this and excited to be part of Education on Air. So to get started, I'm just going to share my screen really quickly and we'll get underway. Cool. So just a little bit about the school. McKinnon was one of the first schools to go Google Apps way back in 2010. We've been on a fairly sort of busy and I guess challenging journey for the last sort of 5 or 6 years. And we've learned a lot in that process. So hopefully I can save you some of the pain. So the Google Apps introduction in 2010 was great for us. I've got a little link in here as well. As we go along in this presentation, I'll be giving away little links and resources throughout the presentation. So feel free to grab those at the end. There'll be links on the page at the end once we finish here as well. So yeah, so there's a little link there to our journey if you want to see a bit more in depth of how we sort of went from A to B, I guess. But we started with Google Apps, and then we were one of the first schools, or the first sort of large-scale one-to-one rollout of Chromebooks in Australia. And that was 3 years ago, where we now have over 2,000 Chromebooks, as the session title would suggest. And just a little bit about me, my passion is about really bridging that tech-teacher divide, trying to bring the technical expertise in schools as close to the teaching as possible. And the way I do that is sort of outlined in this process of how we look at schools and how we look at fulfilling the school's visions. So speaking of schools' visions, if we want to sort of start back at the start, when I do consulting work with school groups, you know, one of the things that we talk about is how do we define success with technology? And I think defining success with technology is really just about defining success for your school and then looking at where technology fits within that vision. And we have, of course, a school vision and mission, and most schools are very similar. Most schools have very similar visions. But ultimately, you know, we're trying to provide the opportunity for excellence for every child in the school. And that also means other things like bringing in 21st century skills, you know, improving our collective productivity, you know, getting more done with less time and less resources. And also the big thing for me is, you know, when we translate this into the technology side is to try and build confidence. So one of the things we want is for the learners and teachers to both be super confident to do their job. And I think that's sort of what all this boils down to, is trying to build up confidence in the technology usage that hopefully translates into really meaningful and a lot of usage of the technology in the school. So for us, you know, when we sort of sat down and looked at, okay, we've got a one-to-one program. We had a PC one-to-one program. We thought, right, we need to start looking at Chromebooks and iPads, and we sort of evaluated everything. But Chromebooks really stood out, and I think these are kind of the key reasons from the rest of the competition, whether it's Macs or PCs or iPads or whatever it was. These were the really key, I guess, pillars that stood out for us with Chromebooks and why we ended up kind of choosing them. Obviously, when we did the research, we asked staff what they were doing on these computers. A lot of the feedback was, well, we'd love to do all this stuff, but really, some students don't boot their computer up, and when they come into class, it can take 40 minutes for them to get on to the app that I needed them to get onto. So that really was a big thing we wanted to solve, is that speed and ease of sort of boot up. And as I'm sure most of you know, Chromebooks, we can boot up from nothing to logged in within 5 seconds, and they'll wake from sleep even faster than that. So that, you know, was a real big, I think, positive for us. I think that's something that we couldn't achieve very easily, was that really rapid, super fast, easy to use environment for students. So the reliability was another one as well. It's a big topic, but given the simplicity of the Chromebooks, you know, having just the web front and center, there's very little that can go wrong in terms of managing these from an IT point of view. The diagnostic process is just 3 steps. You disable the extensions, you reboot it. If that doesn't work, you send it off for warranty. So really simple to manage and maintain for the school. So less money spent, obviously, in the maintenance side. And manageability is easy, very easy to deploy. You know, when we had 500 one-to-one PCs in the school, we had 2 people full-time managing that, and now we've gone back to just 1 full-time technician who can manage over 2,000 Chromebooks. So that sort of speaks volumes in terms of their manageability. And the security, so security is baked right in. We don't think about it. It just happens. Antivirus, firewall, threat detection. We've never had a single incident since I've been at the school with anything like that. The odd extension can, be a bit like malware, but really it's really great. And they're obviously collaborative. So the big thing for us was collaboration. So we love this idea of being web ready and iterating all the time rather than having a big update that kind of scares everyone off. These are really easy to use, web ready devices, and they're geared for being connected all the time. They're geared for being on Hangouts, being on email, quickly jumping between tasks, and that's the sort of skills I think that we need to use to survive in this economy, is these problem solving and collaborative skills. And actually, Microsoft of all people have a great hiring policy around this. Whenever they hire new staff, they say we want people who can solve big problems with large groups of people and do so at distance. So that's solving big problems with many people at distance. And I think that's a really great way to think about sort of 21st century skills, is that we need to be readying our students to be able to do that when they leave school, not to learn that in their jobs, but to perhaps learn it at school. And hopefully we can enable that with technology. And I think Chromebooks are a great device for doing that. So they really met our vision. But I sort of want to talk a little bit more about how we kind of rolled this out and how we got the good, I guess, usage and results that we got from using Chromebooks a little bit rather than the device themselves. And for me, it starts with these kind of 2 pillars here. We have access and professional development, and hopefully if you get those 2 things right, you get confidence. So the following approach, to how we sort of laid this out was to look at, well, okay, what are we doing on the access layer? So the things like Wi-Fi and internet and those type of things. And then what are we doing on the PD and communication layer? How are we getting this information out to staff and students effectively? And if we get those 2 right, hopefully we build some confidence. And of course, we're measuring that confidence through Google Forms. I'm doing a survey, every year of students and staff. So if we break down access, the first sort of part of the puzzle, I suppose, we want to make sure that in terms of our internet and Wi-Fi, it's 100% rock solid. So not only are we able to jump online, but also we've got the speeds to be able to do things like streaming videos. So I've got a little graph there on the slide of how we've grown our internet sort of connection over the years, and it looks like it's not letting up. Next year we'll probably go up to 1 gigabit. We're at 400 megabit at the moment. Not sure if you can read those numbers at home, but we definitely will keep building that up. We've just in the last couple of weeks capped out our 400 megabit connection with 2,000 students. That gives you an idea of just how much this stuff's getting used. And there's a little rule of thumb there. If you take your student count, you divide it by 7, that should be a good starting point if you're just moving to cloud services or to Chromebooks or something like that, for where your internet should be in terms of speed. So there's not just obviously the size of your pipe that matters. It's not all about size. It's also about what the experience is like. So if you're in a classroom and the internet feels slow, even though your internet is really fast and great, then something else might be wrong. That still means the internet's slow. So we try and look at ways of testing while there's a lot of load, going into classrooms saying, right, let's make sure we get our internet connection just right here. So that's kind of the first step that we need to get right. We also have to look at Wi-Fi as well. So sometimes the issue is not with the internet connection, but with the Wi-Fi connection. And I've got a map here of these lovely heat maps that vendors love to give you when you get a new Wi-Fi. But realistically, that's not what happens during class. We have a lot of devices in very small areas, all crammed into classrooms. It can often be a lot worse than this when you go into the classroom, and can be a lot slower inside the classroom. So my advice to you would be walk around during peak times and see how the Wi-Fi really is to use. And again, there's a little freebie there. There's a little white paper on how to implement our Ruckus. We use Ruckus Wireless here with Chromebooks and Chromecast as well for really reliable results. So then we sort of looked at our purchasing model, and just to give you an overview, a quick overview of how we rolled these laptops out to all our students. We have 2,000 students in the school. They all have laptops. We have a parent purchase model. They last for 3 years. The device lasts for 3 years. They buy them at year 7. Then at the end of year 9, they can take them home and use them at home. We deprovision them, and they get a new one at year 10 and take that through to year 12. So the management license comes with that as well, so we can make sure we can avoid catastrophes and manage them appropriately for the school. And also we deliver them to, in our case, to a store, but we can also get them delivered to home. So we don't actually touch the device at the school. It's all pre-enrolled at the factory and delivered straight to their homes. And there's some more information on that coming up. So that's our model. And then when we look at access, we talk about things like apps and how it sort of integrates into the curriculum. And there's a lot of myths around Chromebooks, not being able to work on the internet. But when they're not on the internet. But the reality is that 99% of what we were trying to do inside of classrooms was either already being done on the web or could easily be done using a web tool. So we did, a tremendous amount of research into this, finding out what people are actually using, could they use or be happy to use a different tool online. And the reality is that that they were happy to. So there's definitely a lot of talk out there, they're not a full-powered computer, but we weren't looking for a machine that did everything, because reality was most kids were just going on the web. So we were looking for a machine that did most of what most people need most of the time. And we didn't remove, we haven't removed our PC labs and our Mac labs in the school. Chromebooks are the one-to-one tool for web research and for that kind of utilitarian purpose. And we have the computer labs and the specialist labs for music and media and arts and those kind of things for everything else. So one of the big things you run into is this offline problem of, I can't use them offline. Well, the reality is these days you can. There's a lot of apps that are available offline. The whole Google Apps suite, in fact, Gmail through to Calendar, Google Drive, have offline capabilities. So you can send an email, you can create a calendar event, you can create a new Google Doc in Google Drive. And when you come back online, they all just sync seamlessly. We have a Year 9 program that takes advantage of this, goes into the city, and they do surveys in the city. When they come back, all the data just syncs back in, so it works brilliantly. And then finally, we have sort of the policy and the communication around the one-to-one program. So I'll sort of share with you some of our parent letters here, our acceptable use policy, and also the Year 10 and the Year 7 parent letters. So if you want to have a look at those, feel free. But one of the things you've kind of got to be a little careful around is the Privacy Act, especially in Australia. Our Privacy Act, you have to be very clear on if your data is going to be stored overseas, personal data, you have to opt out of that or opt into that in effect. So I've got a copy of our acceptable use policy there where we outline some of the key terminology in where your data will be stored and what to expect when using Google Apps in school. So on the next side, we've got professional development. So professional development is kind of the big piece for me. Like half my job is split between the IT operations and then also the evangelization. So how do we get this stuff used in the classroom effectively? It's no good having this fantastic system if no one's using it. So one of the ways we kind of addressed this initially was when we were about to implement the Chromebooks, we implemented a skills checklist, and we've got a copy of it here, which was a paper-based form that basically just took people through the basics of creating a doc, doing a Google presentation, creating a Google spreadsheet, really just the straightforward stuff that you kind of need to know in order to get on with your work and be successful working at McKinnon. So this was sort of the step one to bring that bottom up. And one of the things we found during that process was trying to train people in large groups was really difficult. So rather than sort of getting everyone in a room and saying, here's how to create and share documents, we had these one-to-one sessions where people could come to a room once a week. Myself and my team would be there to work with them one-on-one on particular issues or particular skills on this checklist. And that was to kind of bring everyone up to a baseline, make sure everyone felt supported. It was a lot of work, to be truthful, but we're sort of reaping the benefits of that now, where the staff body is very capable and it just accepts that this is the way we do things at the school and we've got to get on board with it. So the big middle group, you got your early adopters, your middle and your laggards. The middle group are right on board, and it's sort of pressuring now the laggards to say, well, everyone else is doing it, I need to get on and do it too. So yeah, feel free to grab a copy of that if you'd like to take a look at it. And the PD, now we're looking at sort of internal and external PD. We've sort of had a few approaches to this. And as I mentioned, training people in groups is really hard because we pitch in the middle and we'll say, okay, we're going to do a moderately skillful session on Google Docs. And there's groups in there who can't even turn the computer on, and then there's groups who are already, integrating it with third-party programs and doing all sorts of stuff. And the reality is that middle band is pretty thin. So instead, we try to encourage PD shares for internal department PDs. So many schools do a similar thing where we'll sort of share things internally. And we also have external PD come in. So instead of an external PD provider coming in and saying, right, we're going to take you through the Google Apps Suite as a big group of 60 people, or, we've got 150 staff here, it's hard to kind of divide that up into big groups. With external providers, we really use that as a catalyst to starting conversations. So we wanted to make sure that the external providers, they'd come in. We used Mike from Using Technology Better. He came in and spoke to, the whole staff about things they probably hadn't heard of. So just rapid fire about, Ngram Viewer or Google Books or various Google services or ways to use Google Apps that they perhaps hadn't have thought of before. It wasn't a how to do this. It was this is what I can do. So just demonstrating those things that could be done rather than how to do them. So that was really successful in starting those conversations, and I think getting people excited about Chromebooks and about Google Apps and about change in general. So that was really key in our journey. And I'm going to show you in a second here the timeline of how we did all of that. And really what I want you to sort of take from this is when we look at a timeline like this and everything that was involved in kind of rolling out Chromebooks initially, most of it is some form of communication or professional development. Whether it's PD for the parents or PD for the students or PD for the teachers, it's all some form of communication. So here's a little sort of outline of what we did, and you'll be able to grab this and have a look at it later. I've been through most of it already. And there's a little video in there of my presentation to staff about what a Chromebook was and how we rolled them out, and when we did briefings and when we ran PDs and things like that. So the final piece of the puzzle was the technical support. And this is just sort of a bit more from my end. Obviously, I'm an IT manager, and I'm pretty passionate about building technology that's useful in the classroom. And it's sort of my plea to everyone is, if you are working in IT, try and get involved in school activities. Try and coach a soccer team or do something, because the closer you can get to the learning and the teaching and the I guess building empathy for what's going on in the classroom, the better and more effective we'll be. And in terms of the team I manage here, we'll make sure that we actually do observation in the classroom. We have a peer observation system here, and we kind of do our own version of that. We'll go in and sit and look at what kids are using on their laptops, what staff are needing to do that they can't do, and perhaps devising solutions where staff are getting stuck. And I think that's been a real breakthrough for us in terms of capturing what's actually going on in classrooms, not what the surveys are telling us, but what's actually happening, and also creating a culture of innovation where staff feel supported to actually let themselves try things and take risks. And that's the kind of environment that I certainly want to work in. And I think it's the environment that encourages better use of the tools. So secondary to this, in terms of that skills checklist I showed you earlier, we actually have our own sort of self-service portal, I call it, where people can come along and help themselves. A lot of staff don't want to come and interrupt us, so we've kind of digitized that checklist in effect, where you can go onto this little website. It's just a WordPress website, and basically make your own, roll your own little service thing. So here we've got sort of how to make a Google site, how to connect to the network, some stuff for Google Apps is here. So people can come in and work at their own pace. If they get stuck, they've got somewhere to come back to and reference. So that's been tremendously successful for us. Again, that link is on this slide. You can have a quick look at that. It's public, anyone can see it, which is fantastic. So also, while I sort of run through this presentation, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in below. I'll get to those in a couple of minutes. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to work through some questions. And if there's anything that I've missed, I know I'm trying to go at a rapid pace. This is normally sort of a 40-minute session, but we'll try and get through it all in 20 if we can. So just to recap really on the core sort of pillars here, it's number one, getting that access right. So making sure your Wi-Fi is rock solid, making sure that you're not setting yourself up for failure. If people are coming in with their laptops trying to connect them to Wi-Fi that doesn't work, that's going to really degrade and erode a lot of that confidence that we were talking about. So we want to make sure that that stuff's rock solid before we start anything else. And then we want to provide the PD on top of that. Say, okay, now we've got this great access. How do we use it? How do we leverage it? How can we be more useful to you as a technical team, but also how can we support you as a school in our strategy for technology? And then hopefully if you get those two things right, you see some confidence growing. And that's certainly what we see in terms of staff just using it as a second nature, and encouraging, I guess, people to look at technology as a tool that is almost invisible, like the pen and paper. There's something you would rely on, and something that's really easy for you to use and take advantage of with your class. So a little bit of the results of this. We've got, what does all this mean in measurable terms? Well, obviously this is a bit of a cheeky one, but in terms of the speed that I spoke about earlier, I think this is probably the most underrated thing about Chromebooks is people think, okay, yes, they're fast, but what about everything else? But we need to kind of stop for a minute and say, yes, they are really fast. This is the boot time versus the login time of a Windows laptop and a Chromebook. And this was the exact Windows laptop we had in the hands of Year 12s. Used to take about 7 minutes to cold boot and log in. And obviously the Chromebook takes around 5 seconds. So, just a tremendous difference in class. If you picture walking into a class, you ask students to all open their devices and they're all able to be on the internet within 5 seconds. And if you throw in the mix something like Google Tone or Hapara Teacher Dashboard, where you can push them all to a specific website, that makes the experience for teaching with these devices really seamless. And I think it also has the benefit of pushing people to try things they hadn't tried before, again, taking those risks and doing things differently in the classroom. So yeah, definitely login time is a big one. The second one we've been tracking over the last 4 years actually is the perception of Google Docs versus Microsoft Office. So we wanted to make sure that, okay, we've got Chromebooks, we've got Google Apps. People are coming out of primary school being really heavily developed into Office for our feeder schools. So they all love Office when they come in here with PowerPoint presentations and Word docs. We want to make sure that, yes, that tide is shifting and they're starting to see those benefits. Because if they don't feel and see those benefits, then we're really just trying to force something on them that perhaps isn't good for them or relevant for them. So we've been tracking that over the last 4 years, and we don't have 2016 in there because the survey was just performed about 2 weeks ago. And it's actually jumped up to 75%. So we've seen a steady growth of perception when asked between using Google Docs and Office. And we've certainly seen that mirrored in our usage as well. So huge amount of Google Docs created. In fact, about 4 or 5 months ago, we passed the threshold of creating 1,000 Google Docs every day that students are at school. So a tremendously large number of documents, and it looks to be growing exponentially. We're not sure where that'll cap off yet, but it's still growing. So very exciting that the technology is being used. Now, when I share the link out to the presentation there will be a little video in there as well that you can have a look at some students talking about their Chromebooks. So just in closing, one of the big kind of bumper things for me was around, something that I'm super proud of was around having a working device in every class. And again, it's kind of like that speed thing. It seems like a small thing, like, of course you'd want to have working devices in every class. Makes total sense, right? But the reality is, technically, to do that with PCs, Macs, or iPads or otherwise, it's really difficult, because if you break a device, all your data's on that device. You have to drop everything, try and repair that device, give it back to the student as quickly as possible. Sometimes that could be 3 days, sometimes that can be a week, depending on the vendors that you're waiting for. So, whether it's broken, you forgot the laptop, it's flat, or whatever happened to their laptop, it doesn't matter. They come to the IT office, there's a loan device ready for them. All their work's immediately there. They pick up where they left off. And it sort of links back to that first slide about giving every student the opportunity for excellence. And we believe that by providing an equal device of good quality in every classroom, that we are reaching that goal, which is fantastic. So we have just a little thank you slide there. There's a link to Education On Air's website. If you are on the website, you should see a link to this presentation. Maybe Chris can jump in here if that link is available.
Oh, yep, absolutely. That link's available on the page, so please do jump on that. Just to let you know that the page will actually kind of disappear until 4 p.m. once this presentation is finished. So make sure you come back and or grab hold of the presentation now. And if you've got any other questions or you want to look at these questions, have a look at them at 4 p.m. But we do, Blake, if you're happy to answer a couple, we do have some questions.
Absolutely. Yep. Happy to
So,
go.
Tony Kane, so I believe is in Wellington. So he was talking about the difference between BYOD and Chromebooks. And, the idea is about equity or management, and just wanted to kind of see if you could clarify that for him.
Sure. So there's kind of two structures there. So we actually don't run a BYOD programs in the strict sense. We run a one-to-one program. So we prescribe and we say, look, everyone needs to have this particular Chromebook, or these two particular Chromebooks in our case. We offer a little bit of choice there. But ultimately, no, the BYOD programs, that's open slather. You bring your own and you jump in. Now, you can sort of prescribe. A lot of schools that I've worked with have said, okay, you can bring your own, but it has to be a Chromebook. Now, some of the challenges there are how do you enroll those Chromebooks when they arrive at the school? Often you'll miss some, so you're pushing things out to some kids and not to others. They're not getting that, I guess, equitable experience. So our choice was to go fully BYOD, but we are, a fairly high-performing school in a fairly wealthy neighbourhood. So I know, there's challenges out in rural towns and certainly some areas of Melbourne where, and I've worked with schools where they can't, enforce something like that. They'd be, only having 50% uptake of the program. So for us, we make sure it's 100% uptake. Equity is kind of our number one concern. So from that perspective, that's how we kind of initially give them the device. They get it over Christmas. They come in. I noticed there's a little bit about digital citizenship there. They'll come in to school, already have used the device, and it just connects first day because it's already been pre-enrolled into our domain and everything's happened at the factory. So on that first day, it just works. And then in year 7, we've built into the curriculum a little bit of digital citizenship and ownership and safe social media and that sort of stuff into the curriculum. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
No, I think that's great. Thank you, Blake. In terms of, we do have a question from Jay Plumridge as well about the G Suite versus Office. And it's one of those kind of technical questions, I guess. Do you want to grab that?
Yeah, so do Chromebooks only use G Suite, or can Office be installed? So there's no kind of concept of installing things onto a Chromebook. It's really just linking to web services or to extensions. And in terms of access to Office, yes, Office works on Chrome, the online Office, but not everything works on the online Office that works with Office on your PC, if that makes sense. So it's quite confusing. It can be confusing if you're rolling out Chromebooks with Office. The other thing to mention is you need a Google account to log into a Chromebook. You can't just sign in to any old account on the Chromebook. So basically it has to be a Google account. You can use the Office 365 online version, but you're not going to get the benefits of the full Google Apps suite. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Big thanks to Tony there. And I think that was pretty much it. So was there anything else there, Chris?
No, again, it was just a question for the link to the presentation. Can I thank you though, Blake, because really pioneering in that space and really pushing at McKinnon to do this on scale and like a big scale. I think it's great that you have ironed out a lot of the creases and kind of the issues and problems, and your ability to share that and your generous sharing of those resources as well is absolutely fabulous. Oh, hang on, a question just has dropped in from Lisa Hood. Do you as an IT leader have a Chromebook, or are you using both for supporting infrastructure in the school? A great question.
Yeah, very good question. So whilst we do, we have a student Chromebook program. We offer Chromebooks for staff. Staff can take them up. But we support PCs and Macs. And like I mentioned earlier, we still have PC labs and Mac labs. And I'm not about sort of saying, well, this one device is for everything. It's not. Chromebooks are a great generalist device for that kind of utilitarian, research use case, or building documents. I mean, reality is 90% of what we do in schools is either researching online, building a document, or building a presentation or something similar, or a video. So it covers those things really well. But for when you need to jump into GarageBand or an industry app like Photoshop, we still maintain that infrastructure, those labs, those devices. Staff still have choice on their device. So yes, we do kind of support both infrastructures at the school. And I think we're better off for it. It's a more holistic approach to education. And thanks again, Chris. I should mention as well, just around sharing, obviously in there's links to all the stuff we've spoken about, but also that comes down to our philosophy at the school a little bit. So whilst I like to share with everyone in the greater community, also internally, we have a very open approach to the Wi-Fi, to kids innovating, trying things, taking risks. We don't block things. We have very open internet, almost completely open internet. And I think that's helped a lot of this, I guess, flow-on effect for the usage that we're seeing and the buy-in that we're seeing, is kids don't feel like they're going to be trapped or they're going to be monitored. It's a very open approach, and they're trusted. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Blake. That's a fantastic presentation, and again, thanks for sharing and being really generous with those resources. So again, thanks for your questions, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this. You will be able to access the recording of this and the Q&A at the end of all of the live sessions, so about 4 p.m. Australian daylight time, the time in Sydney and Melbourne, whatever time that is. Thanks again, Blake, and we'll speak to you soon, mate.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Great to be a part of it. See you guys.